Goku puts an end to his fight against Frieza, but Frieza, unable to accept his loss, throws some Kienzan-type discs at Goku. Goku tries to double back and make the attack hit Frieza a la Ma Jr., but it doesn't work. Then, when Frieza gets distracted and does end up in the path of his discs, Goku tries to get him to dodge. But at any rate, Frieza gets chopped into pieces, until he begs Goku for mercy. Goku lambasts Frieza over everything he's done, then he throws a ki blast at him, incinerating him and finishing him for good. Well, no. But that's really what looks like should have happened. Instead, this ki blast, unlike every other ki blast in the series, saves Frieza from imminent death. Well, as they say in Paris is Burning, let me put on my reading glasses, 'cause the library is open. This is stupid. So stupid. Okay, you know, as bad as I thought the whole Piccolo taking ki from Gohan and Krillin thing was, on some level, I can tolerate it. At least they're only sharing energy. But let me ask you something. If firing ki at people can save them from mortal wounds, why does anybody in this series need to die? Why do they worry about running out of Senzu? Why do they need medical machines? Why do they need anything when they can just shoot medicine out of their hands? Is he a mage? Did Goku class change to a white mage? Did I just fall into a JRPG? Is it only a Super Saiyan thing? Is Goku Space Jesus now? Well, we have Super Saiyans clogging up the rest of the series, yet we never see anybody do this again. People sometimes complain that I supposedly nitpick too much, but this is a big deal. This is the climax of the arc, and it's centered around this inexplicable power that's never been seen before and will never be seen again, and should completely change everything about how Dragon Ball works. You have Silver Age Superman standing on the sidelines going, "Hey, you really can't just introduce new powers so haphazardly." But Lance, you say, it wouldn't have worked on anybody but Frieza. He's an alien. His biology is clearly different, so maybe getting cut in half isn't as big a deal for him as it is for other people. Okay, so he wasn't dying in the first place then? If not, then what did Goku even do? I mean, you can't have it both ways. If we're going the Python-esque route of it's only a flesh wound when someone loses half of his body, then what did he even need Goku for? Oh, it's not because he's dying, it's because he's out of ki. I guess he keeps all of his ki in his legs then. Look at that, all his ki's just pouring out of his torso. Oh no, wait, those are just his intestines. I guess Frieza doesn't really need those, does he? As infuriatingly stupid as that is, it brings me to my bigger issue with the fight. As much as I enjoy it for its Dragon Ball intrigue and its apocalyptic setting finally making Namek an interesting looking place, it's hard for me to stay invested in it because it's just so clean. It's like Goku and Frieza are made of Teflon, and everything they throw at each other just slides right off. Oh sure, clothes are ripped, there's the obligatory static facial blood, and there's a bit of heavy breathing on Frieza's part near the end to show that he's fatigued while Goku is not. But there's no real sign that this life or death battle is taking any significant toll on either of them. Once again, let me direct you to the Saiyan Arc fights. There are clear, easy-to-follow progressions of what shape the characters are in. There are real, easy-to-recognize injuries and relatively realistic reactions to them. And by the end, everyone is just trashed, barely able to move. I feel that. I can relate to that. I can't relate to this. And if I can't relate to it, it's difficult for me to stay emotionally invested in it. And if Frieza can go so far as to be sawed in half and have it be only a minor inconvenience, well, you've lost me. I can't understand the stakes of this fight anymore when it hardly has any appreciable effect on the characters. But the gist of it is, Frieza incurs a double hoist by his own petard moment, since he not only kept fighting after Goku walked away, but now uses the ki Goku gave him to launch one more attack at him, forcing Goku to finally blast him away for good. For good. That's it. It's over. Completely. Now all that's left to do is to escape the planet, but in the greatest of shocks, Frieza's Swiss cheese ship can no longer fly. So everyone at Kaio's conveniently closes his eyes as planet Namek explodes. The funny thing is that Toriyama gets to the end of the story and suddenly realizes he needs to make Yamcha the emotional focus and give him lots of stuff to do after basically ignoring him up to this point. So it's Yamcha who gets the big "no" close-up moment just before Namek explodes, and it's Yamcha who volunteers for the burden of passing on the information to those on Earth. Hey, no complaints from me, and it fits in with how his character has traditionally been used. I just find it funny that out of the blue he's important again. The Grand Elder dies again and passes his title on to another Elder, Muri, who is supposedly the same Elder Gohan and Krillin witness being killed. For some reason, the Grand Elder's body disappears this time when it didn't before. If he's supposed to be the equivalent of the god of the planet, it seems he should have taken his body with him the first time like Earth's god did, but if he's not, then what god did grant the Grand Elder his body, and why didn't this god do it before? Was it Kaio? I mean, he's referring to himself now only as the god over the northern galaxy. Here I could have sworn he was supposed to be the god above all other gods. So much for that hype. And he's about to confess that Namek is outside of his jurisdiction. Does Kaio have jurisdiction over a person who lives outside of his galaxy but is currently residing in his galaxy? I don't know. Upon learning the Namekian Dragon Balls can resurrect people multiple times, Bluma delivers Yamcha's news more than a little callously, totally on board with the idea that death is now just a minor obstacle. However, Kaio points out that since a resurrected person returns to life where they die, Goku and Krillin will simply come back to life in space and then quickly die another agonizing death. Presumably there's no local god who could just give them their bodies in the afterlife, which could explain why Krillin never gets a chance to train with Kaio. Surprisingly, it's Vegeta who comes up with the solution. I guess since he was just dead, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he could have some insight into the situation. But he says they should just wish Goku's and Krillin's souls to Earth first. And everyone says that's a great idea, and I'm just left scratching my head because that makes no sense. Let's explore how death and resurrection work in Dragon Ball. When someone normally dies, they leave a body and a soul. The soul goes on to the afterlife and becomes one of those little clouds we see in line at Enma's. The body is just a dead body, an empty shell. When someone is brought back to life, the soul returns to the body, and obviously the person comes back to life where the body currently is. This is all quite logical, or as logical as necromancy can be. The only exception to this is if the dead person is allowed to keep his body in the afterlife, in which case the body travels into the afterlife with the soul. That's the reason Goku takes 2 days to return to Earth after he's brought back to life. His soul and body had still been connected even in the afterlife, so there was nothing on Earth for his soul to travel back to. And on the surface, this new wrinkle seems to be consistent with that. But there's just one really big screw-up here. See, when I was first exposed to this content, the concept was slightly mistranslated as remains. As in, they were to wish Goku's and Krillin's remains, i.e. what's left of the bodies, to Earth. And that makes total sense. The soul travels to the body, so moving the body where you need it to come back to life makes perfect sense. But that's not what's being said here. They say soul or spirit, and that's both here with Vegeta and when they're actually talking to Purunga making the wishes. But what good would that do? That's completely backwards from everything Dragon Ball and common sense has taught us about death and resurrection in this world. The whole reason they can't just wish them back to life normally is because they would have died on Namek. That's where what's left of them would be. Even after their souls are removed, their remains would still be at Namek, so logically when their friends make the wish, their souls will fly from Earth back to Namek and they'll still die in space. But for some reason, despite all logic, it works. Or it works for Krillin, where the first wish brings his soul to Earth and the second brings him back to life. Turns out Goku isn't dead but refuses to be wished back to Earth, so the third wish brings Yamcha back to life. After 130 days passes, which is a Namekian year, Chaozu and Tenshinhan are brought back to life, and the Namekians are given a new home, and for a year everyone lives happily ever after, including Vegeta, who is there for some reason. It may feel like I rushed through that, but that's only because the story does. Despite how long this story arc is, when it gets to the end, Toriyama just severs the break lines entirely. Everything they worked so hard to achieve is just glossed over. The whole reason they went to Namek in the first place, to wish their friends back to life, is not even shown. It's all just text. And to add insult to injury, it's in a duplicate of a panel from 5 pages earlier. To an extent, I get it. As I just said, people who have their bodies can't just return to Earth instantly. They would have to travel back along the Serpentine Road just like Goku did. So it would have been a very anticlimactic wishing session for those making it. But it could have been handled through a montage, like the one they used for the Genki Dama, show the revived heroes showing up at Kame House or Capsule Corporation 2 days later and have a happy, tearful reunion. Something. Anything. And am I the only one rather annoyed that they give Goku and Krillin preferential treatment when they've supposedly been dead the shortest amount of time? That just seems really screwed up. But hey, with all that time spent at Kaio's and all the power they've gained, I'm sure Yamcha, Ten, Shinhan, and Chaozu are going to have huge roles in the next arc, right? At any rate, after a year has passed with no word from Goku, everyone suddenly feels a huge, powerful key approaching. And it's Frieza. Not dead after all, but revived as a cyborg and on his way to Earth to exact revenge. Not only that, but he's brought his father with him. And so the Freeza Arc comes to a close with the return of Frieza. Wow. We were allowed to think he was dead for 2 whole weeks before bringing him back. As much as I like the idea of leading directly from one arc into the next, I think that's a misstep in this case. There needed to be a little more time to breathe between Frieza's supposed death and Frieza's shocking return. It also might explain why the end of the arc feels so rushed, since 4.5 pages of the last chapter of it are devoted to setting up the next arc. But that's the way it is. So, the Frieza Arc. The Frieza Arc is fascinating in just how transitionary it is. It almost feels like a totally different series going into it than it does leaving it. The art style makes its biggest leap from the rounder designs of yore into the angular style of its later years. Even the logo begins to shift away from the cartoony dragon that had served as a logo for so many years into much more utilitarian designs. The introduction of transformations and brinkmanship tactics change how Dragon Ball stories would be told from here on out. It's rather impressive how the story so abruptly shifts from stealth Dragon Ball quest to the kind of fighting that dominates the second half. I feel the first half of the Frieza arc, while certainly suffering problems of a bland environment and failing to take full advantage of the concept, is some of the most tense and exciting storytelling in the series. Vegeta really steals the show here, proving himself incredibly resourceful and brutal. He is by far the best thing about this arc, and that is no small compliment. However, as popular as the second half of the Frieza arc is, I feel it contains some of the most poorly executed concepts in all of Dragon Ball, and the fact that they serve as such an influence throughout the rest of the franchise is very frustrating to me. As I've said, it has the absolute worst application of a transforming villain, which only serves to make a good portion of the fight completely pointless. Future arcs will handle this better. The lack of relatable progressive injuries makes it difficult to really connect to the fighting. Between Frieza's massive build-up, Super Saiyans, and a fight that literally takes out an entire planet, I feel the stakes have gotten way too high to be relatable. And since the series is all about escalation, making the next threat even bigger than the last, it's a problem that's only going to get worse. There's plenty of impressive eye candy on display in the fighting, but much less heart to the proceedings. The first half of the arc is largely structured well. That there are often multiple storylines running parallel and intersecting is very impressive for Toriyama. I'd say it's definitely more satisfying than the multiple storylines of the Piccolo arc, most of which involve training for new power-ups and don't really have any connection to each other. While Gohan and Krillin share center stage, they're probably not used as well as they could be. Gohan certainly has very satisfying moments. He's completely shed the fear he struggled with in the Saiyan arc, so when he stands up for the Namekians and stands up against Rikum and Frieza, it's all the more satisfying. However, in a sense, it already feels like he's gone as far as he can go, and he rather settles into the generic, high-principled child hero, but lacks a lot of the elements that made his father such an interesting character. This is the arc that solidifies Krillin's continuing relevance in the franchise, and I love that he gets to take on an active leadership role. He does make some flat-out stupid decisions, in fact the same stupid decision, which causes him to get caught by Vegeta twice, but I feel it's just enough to make him human. Unfortunately, while their big power-up is a natural turn for the story to take, it ultimately doesn't do them any good. The biggest problem is how Goku basically steals the story right out from under them, so they never really have a satisfying conclusion. Well, Vegeta does. His death wraps up his story perfectly, and in a lot of ways it's a shame he had to come back to life when he had such a satisfying exit. But Krillin's death, while good motivation for Goku's role, does nothing for Krillin's. And at the same time, Gohan leaves the battlefield and is basically done as well. It flies in the face of what the focus of the story had been. In terms of characters, how Goku has handled this arc is his most serious failing. I've already gone into detail about how he's become a save-the-day plot device instead of a character, so I won't get into that again. I will give the story credit for using the concept of a Super Saiyan to continue to showcase the contrast between Goku and Vegeta. Naturally, Vegeta does not deserve this gift. Instead, he must humble himself before the very man he once looked down on and beg that Goku do what he couldn't. And so it ends up being Goku gets what Vegeta so longed for. But that said, Goku's behavior after he becomes a Super Saiyan confuses me a bit. On one hand, Kaio describes his insistence on letting Frieza max out as proof that he's no longer Son Goku but a rage-filled Super Saiyan. However, this is going to be Goku's mindset from here on out whether he's a Super Saiyan or not. And hell, in one chapter, Goku insists he won't let Frieza reach max power, but in the very next chapter he's all for it, with no explanation for the flip-flop at all. But despite his hunger for battle, an attribute discussed both before Goku achieves the form and while he's in it, he still walks away from the fight twice. He tries to get Frieza cut in half and then tries to keep Frieza from getting cut in half. He really just seems all over the map here, and his behavior seems to be whatever the plot requires it to be at that particular moment. People often crow that this is the arc where Goku comes to terms with his Saiyan heritage. I mean, I guess. I can't really deny it. There is that one line where Goku eulogizes Vegeta by saying he'll take some of Vegeta's Saiyan pride for himself, so the idea is technically there, but there's not really any kind of application for it, unless accepting yourself as a Saiyan is the only way to unlock Super Saiyan. But that's not one of the elements Goku lists in his speech, and he seems to know all about what makes a Super Saiyan. And if that was the case, it should have happened when he gleefully announced to Kaio that he was a Saiyan. The fact of the matter is, while a few of the movies from around this period have Goku steadfastly denying his Saiyan heritage, the Goku in the manga never really seemed to carry around any angst from it. If people are arguing that this is when he starts taking on more Saiyan traits and becoming more of a selfish jerk, well, yeah. But that's hardly a good thing, I'd say. And there are certainly a few examples from before he became a Super Saiyan where he did stupid, selfish things. I think it's just as likely that Super Saiyan took away his few remaining brain cells. Frieza is a fantastic villain. His politeness while wiping people out is all the more satisfying when compared to his temper tantrums when he's finally backed into a corner. He is the ultimate spoiled ruler but can back it up with more than just his servants doing his dirty work for him. I certainly see some parallels between him and Commander Red in that everyone is terrified of this tiny, unassuming guy. While the structure of his fight and transformations make him look a bit less effective than he was built up to be, I love how he can be simultaneously adorable and terrifying. And like another tiny, unassuming fictional character, I for one like that Frieza's race does not have a name. He doesn't need one. I don't care to know one. I hope there never is one. Frieza, who fears Super Saiyans, ultimately creates his own when he kills Kuririn. If he had been dedicated to taking out all Saiyans rather than playing around with Goku, then this never would have happened. Just like his discs and his other sneak attack, Frieza tends to screw himself over, which is almost always satisfying in a villain. I do feel that Frieza teeters past the point of him being reasonably careless and into eye-roll inducing territory, but him making his own Super Saiyan straddles that line perfectly. I really hate having to say this, but the thought did recently occur to me that Dragon Ball Minus might have been an attempt by Toriyama to retroactively forge a true connection between Goku and Frieza. In the pre-Minus story, Goku was sent to Earth to conquer it. Frieza had no more to do with that than with any other Saiyan out on other planets. But in Minus, Goku is only sent to Earth because Bardock suspects that Frieza is going to destroy the Saiyans. And that would mean that Frieza is responsible for creating his own nemesis from the very beginning. Ultimately, I don't feel it really helps the Frieza Arc story all that much. I mean, say what you will about the Joker killing Batman's parents in the Tim Burton film, but at least as part of a greater tapestry of interactions of the two characters affecting each other in symmetrical ways. And Minus still feels like it does more harm than good, but if you're looking for an excuse to like Minus, there it is. As for the other villains, well, Zarbon is really the only one who truly leaves an impression on me, sticking around just long enough to feel like an important part of the story. That he is a formidable fighter and is interested in looking good, but has a hideous transformation elevates him above the plethora of generic thugs that tend to populate the world of Dragon Ball. I mean, he certainly has more to distinguish him than, say, tambourine, cymbal, and drum. As for Dodoria, yeah, he is pretty much just a generic thug. As for the Ginyu, while they're amusing collectively, none of them are really distinguishable from each other in terms of personality. And I've already gone into detail as to what I think works and doesn't work about them, so I'll just leave it there. As I said earlier, the ending feels incredibly rushed, which results in so many head-scratching moments, some of which I've already mentioned. I don't care how Goku hand-waves it away by saying it's like his own spaceship, which is just ridiculous enough on its own. There's no way Goku is going to figure out how to operate a completely alien mothership in seconds. To this day, I have no idea exactly what the Namekians' last wish is. Did they scout out a planet beforehand? If so, how? Was Dr. Brief making spaceships for Namekian explorers? So does Porunga take them to that planet? Or did they just make a new planet with the Dragon Balls and get transported to that? And if so, wouldn't that count as 2 wishes? It just feels like it doesn't matter. Just get the story over with, who cares? Between all those rushed moments and the other illogical moments at the end of the arc, it really feels like this was rushed out the door. I don't get why the end of the Frieza arc feels so incredibly sloppy and pieced together. And no, for all of you saying it, there has never been a single official source that has corroborated the fan rumor that Toriyama was planning to end Dragon Ball with the Frieza arc. Never. So let's just skip on past the speculation that it could feel this way because it was rewritten at the last minute to accommodate a continuing storyline. The Frieza arc is very much a mixed bag for me. On one hand, its first half contains some of the best story and character elements in the entire series. On the other hand, its second half contains some of the sloppiest storytelling and tedious fighting in the entire series. The funny thing is, if I divided this arc into a Namek arc and a Frieza arc like a lot of sources do for some reason, the former would probably get one of my highest scores, while the latter would probably get one of the lowest scores. So on the whole, I'd say it's fair that it balances out to a 5 out of 10. It may be popular, but it has a lot of problems, so it ends up being average. I know I'm in the minority with this one, as many people consider this to be one of the best, if not the best arcs in the entire series, but between its misuse of characters, lackluster fighting, and the worst ending in the entire series, I don't know what else I can do with it. I hope you've enjoyed this extremely long look at this extremely long arc. 13 episodes. A year and 4 months this took. Only 200 chapters to go. And, well, looks like 3 and 1 are the only scores left. But next time the series picks up, it won't be looking at an arc that gets either of those spots. We return to DBD TV to cover the television adaptation of the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai arc. See you there!